Welcome everyone to Wrasslin Raw!
You're listening to Wrasslin Raw, the podcast that takes you back to when the World Wrestling Federation developed a little bit of an attitude. Thank you for joining us. You're here with Ryan Arico.
He's hardcore! He's hardcore! He's hardcore!
Joe Giammatteo.
I want to see this Slammy Award-winning buns.
One for each cheek, right?
I'm the one and only Jason Bartlett. We're going to examine WWE history, one episode of Raw at a time. In this episode of Wrasslin Raw, we're going to be taking a look at the Raw that aired on April 1st, 1996. This Raw was recorded at the Orange Pavilion in San Bernardino, California, and features Vince McMahon and Jerry the King Lawler on commentary. Are you guys ready?
I am ready.
Ready.
All right, then. Let's get into it. By getting into it, let's get into last night a little bit. Last night at WrestleMania 12, we felt the exhilaration after the anticipation. It was the fulfillment of a lifelong dream. For those of you that are constant listeners,
You're forgetting one thing Vince said when they showed Shawn Michaels share in the ecstasy.
Oh, my God.
he did say that. Well, I got all wrapped up in this fulfillment of the lifelong dream because it was Joe's dream to sit in a room in person with Ryan and I and watch some wrestling.
And he shared in the ecstasy.
Gushing. And with that, our show gets kicked off. We are eagerly, and by eagerly I mean with a raging heart on, waiting for the appearance of the new heavyweight champion, Shawn Michaels. Also, The Undertaker will be taking on the currently undefeated Justin Hawk Bradshaw. But before we get to any of that, we've got a long-awaited debut for our first match of the night. Mankind defeats Bob Holly by submission in 3 minutes and 23 seconds. That's right, folks. This is the in-ring and on-screen live debut of Mankind, and it was great to see Mankind coming out, and even greater to see just how much effort they're putting into getting him over right from the start here. He's got low lighting. He's got, overtones of darker, deeper colors behind that, almost kind of like The Undertaker's entrance. I wonder why that is. And the one thing that is somewhat off for me is the music, the entrance music, I should specify that. While I'm not angry about it, it didn't feel like it fit for some reason. At this point in my viewing, I was kind of confused about that, but we'll keep it moving along here. Mankind isn't wasting any time as he gets started, beating on Holly over the ref's shoulder. And man, this was a great opening sequence. Mankind was making his squealing noises and unintelligible growls and groans, pummeling Holly into the corner and only letting up once Holly was down and waving Mankind off. Then Mankind pulls out a clump of hair and shows it to the camera, prompting Vince to call Mankind the most deranged individual in the WWF. Bob Holly comes back fast and hard, though, putting in some great work as he came back at Mankind with punches, kicks. Mankind worked with all of these across the ring. This looked great. At one point, the King points out the bald patches on Mankind, where Mankind's been pulling his own hair out. And that's when Bob Holly gives a roar for the hard camera and then turns around to show his own bald spot. This one more natural than Mankind's, but very visible amongst the mullet. That minor rally didn't last long, however, as Mankind sets up and then applies the Mandible Claw, which I am using that name. We don't get the name of it here at this time, so don't fucking tweet at me. Squealing all the while. God, I loved it. God, I loved it. Vince perfectly punctuates this with, "He's got his fingers down his esophagus."
Jesus.
I can't wait to hear JR say down his gullet.
You know it's good when you can't help spitting all over your computer monitor when you're quoting Vince McMahon.
Do you need time to clean up?
And then different exit music for Mankind, and this was more of what I was thinking of earlier. I forgot that he had different music for entrances and exits, and my memory just got a little bit jumbled. Mankind's exit music is what I was more familiar with. And that's it. That caps off our show opener. I gotta admit, I was just sucked into this. It was an effort to make myself write notes because I just loved watching it. Joe, please get us going on the much anticipated in-ring debut of Mankind.
Well, we should just call it Monday Night Mankind. This might be the best Fallout Monday Night Raw ever. Just because of this debut and, knowing the things that Mick Foley is going to do for the WWF. So the Finks intro, I had to pause, and similar to you, Bartlett, having to clean up your TV screen, I had a little mess to clean up because I was gushing. Just hearing the Finks intro for Mankind, just something so simple, but it's like, man, we're in for a wild ride here, I always loved the vocal effects that Mick Foley does when he's wrestling, the acha,
yeah. When he's throwing those punches.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I don't care much for the pig squealing noises, but those punching noises, I love it. Already, like you mentioned, he's already pulling the hair out. He's already doing all this crazy shit. This is the first time we've seen him. Foley just... One thing that people don't really talk about too much is that he really moves pretty well for a fat guy. You hear that a lot about some of the other guys, like Bam Bam Bigelow, for example, like how athletic he is. But Mick Foley doesn't get enough credit for that, I don't think. He really moves well and just has not necessarily an athleticism, but just a prolific sense of timing. Like he just really knows how to move in the ring. And these "he's hardcore" chants are loud as fuck and pretty impressive considering they're in California, right? I mean, that is
that's way outside the ECW territory.
Way out of the Northeast. So pretty impressive. And there's a lot to be said for a guy who, up to this point, he pretty much made his career as Cactus Jack. So now he's doing a totally different gimmick, and it's like already getting over. So yeah, this is incredible. And I have to say, I know I'm going to be in the minority here, but I was never a fan of the Mandible Claw. I think the reason for it was that I never felt like it was. I feel like it's easy to get away from a Mandible Claw if you're the opponent. So that's kind of why I never really cared for it.
It's interesting you say that because it's one of those moves, and I've heard other people talk about it, about how some people think that it looks kind of not believable. But if applied, is unbelievably painful and
not that it's
very difficult to escape
Not that it's
from.
not believable. I just think that it would be hard to actually get it on someone who is like fighting it away.
I guess you could say that if they're fighting it away. But once it's locked in, it's not something easy to escape from.
Yeah, I don't know. I was never a fan of it. And then Vince just doing the overselling of it makes it worse for me. And then, years later we got the Socko stuff, and that was just like, okay, all right, that's enough for me. But I fucking love Mick Foley, so it doesn't matter.
Like Vince McMahon and Joe just gushing everywhere because of Mankind coming into this. This was amazing. I've been waiting for this for months. And these effective vignettes that they've been doing for about a month now, they've paid off because the moment he comes into onto the ramp, the crowd is booing pretty heavily. So they're already kind of invested in the hatred of Mankind, and that really goes to the credit as to how effective he was and the WWF was at presenting these vignettes. And the moment this match started, Joe, you pointed out his sounds when he throws, a hit, sound like I've talked about how the Undertaker Diesel match it had this memory set in my mind about it was me coming back to the world of wrestling and watching it on a weekly basis. But watching Mankind work in the ring brought up this very weird, familiar feeling in my stomach. Just what I was watching felt second nature to me, for the first time of what we're watching. Like, it was almost I knew exactly what was happening here, but it didn't matter that I knew it. I loved it, and it was going to be beautiful.
That's a whole different level of gushing. You must have had a real mess to clean up.
Well, I'm just saying. Him pulling out his hair, that's something, it's just stuck in my mind, that shot of him yanking his hair out and showing it to the camera. And then when you got to hear those fans up front chanting for him, he's hardcore, and you could also hear a few times when he would get some offensive going, those guys were cheering for him. Everyone else in the building was booing, but you'd hear these little splattering of cheering coming from these people that know him from his other work. And that was really great. I thought this was a good debut for him because I thought him and Bob Holly looked pretty solid together. And Joe, like you said, for a guy who's not in great shape like some of these other people, he can really move in the ring and make things look fantastic. I mean, he's not quite as heavy as a Bam Bam or something. He's almost in between some of the other guys and like the super heavyweights. But the stuff he was doing in the ring worked. Everyone hated him. And it was this extra level of force and brutality that we just haven't really seen from anyone yet. Joe, I always disagreed, or I will disagree with you on the Mandible Claw, in that I always thought it was a good finish, in that it's like the pedigree and the fact that it's a finish that could be believably applied to anyone. No matter how big, how small, it's never going to look botched. He's always going to be able to lock it in and finish out a match without going, oh, if that guy was 100 pounds lighter, that would have looked better. So I always liked it for that thing. And then, of course, the unique aspect of having a separate exit music after he won than the entrance music. Just all around gushing for Mankind here.
Well, you were saying about once he comes out, the crowd actively booing him and that being a result of the vignettes. Are you sure it wasn't because they were just really behind Bob Holly?
Yeah, I think you might be on to something there. Sparkplug does have quite a following.
Yeah.
A huge NASCAR fan base in California, too.
Yeah. San Bernardino Speedway. Yeah, as far as the Mandible Claw goes, for real-world applications, I would suggest you talk to my cousin Beefaroni about the effectiveness of the Mandible Claw. He received it quite a few times. But in terms of its application here in wrestling, I liked it back then. Socko was kind of over the line for me. Obviously, I didn't start hating it or anything like that. I still loved Mankind and McFoley, but Socko just was a bit too much for me as a move. I mean, I was fine with, Mankind having a sock puppet and all of that stuff, but for whatever reason, putting the sock on to apply the claw was something that just never sat right with me.
I always liked him as the Mankind that had the special leather glove on to help effectively apply the Mandible Claw. Yeah. That's what I liked.
With the bite guard in it to keep people from biting him. Yeah. The only other thing that really stood out that you guys were talking about here is the I am hard or he's hardcore chants. And all I could think of whenever I was hearing that in the background was like this scene in my head of Mick wearing like a suit and a tie and saying, I'm hardcore.
With not a merry-go-round.
The carousel?
Carousel or whatever going around in the background, yeah.
All right. A fantastic debut from old Mankind here. And we expected nothing less. It couldn't have been anything other than awesome.
And it's really a shame it's the last we'll see him tonight.
Yes. Yep. That is a shame. But you
I
know
wish
what?
We could say the same about Ed the Biker or whatever the fuck.
Ed Begley Jr. Ed Begley Jr. Oh boy. Duckman was better. I would have preferred Duckman.
Yeah.
Speaking of other things that I would prefer, than Ed Begley Jr. Let's take a look at WrestleMania last night. Our first view of WrestleMania 12 is Todd Pettingzoo, unfortunately, wearing his number 2 buzz cut, interviewing Mark Mero backstage.
He is a giant number 2.
A steaming number 2. Let's not forget that Hunter Hearst Helmsley ran into Mero backstage while berating Hunter's valet, Sable, for Hunter's loss. I chuckled heartily when the King refers to Hunter as having just fought the ultimate battle, because that just seemed both ironic and tragic at the same time. But let's not forget what this added up to, and that was Mark Mero taking issue with Hunter Hearst Helmsley's behavior and subsequently defending Sable. And guess who just so happens to be here in the audience tonight? That's right, folks, it's Sable. Sable bought a ticket, and we get a view of her sitting there, front row, ready and waiting to see Mark Mero in his upcoming WWF in-ring debut match. For the record, I would definitely still prefer to see Goldust in lingerie. Still to come, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, and therefore still to come, Vince McMahon. But first, the obligatory commercial for the WrestleMania 12 Encore, complete with video highlights of the action from last night, as well as video highlights of different fans who apparently were present and had a great time. And that's pretty much it for this segment. There weren't many new things happening here. But Joe, what do you think about how quickly we've moved into Sable being part of the story here?
Yeah, I remember this version of Sable before all of the 23 boob jobs that she had and other surgeries, whatever. But
want to be me?
I don't know. It's a new, fresh face. It's okay for now. You know, I mean, we know what's going to come up in the next couple years, but I don't know. I don't really give a shit about Sable right now. You know, it's kind of weird. It's like they want us to care, but I just don't. The video recap of WrestleMania, I thought was a great video for that encore show. I thought that was pretty cool. And the kid screaming about WrestleMania, I love the kid there's a kid wearing a Sunny shirt. I don't know if you guys saw that, but I liked seeing that.
Most of what they showed here wasn't anything too revealing, I suppose. The only interesting thing is that in this episode, Sable is being shown as a little bit more of the focal point here now, where I guess technically she debuted at WrestleMania, but we didn't really focus on her all that much. So it's interesting we get the debut of Mankind and kind of this start of an actual story for Sable. So 2 real staples of the Attitude Era here getting debuted in this episode. So it's a little bit interesting for that. But I agree, I just don't really care about Sable right now, you know. But it is an important thing of note for sure moving forward. The encore video here, I agree with you, Joe. This did a good job of highlighting, especially it started off with showing us a lot of the footage of this great backlot, Hollywood backlot shit. So, in that golden Cadillac running Rowdy Piper over. So I thought that was a good commercial for WrestleMania. And outside of that, I think I've remembered this happening for the last WrestleMania too. This footage of a bunch of people screaming about how great of a time they had at WrestleMania and stuff like that. But I mean, okay, I guess that's fine.
All right. Well, we will come out of that segment and straight into our next match. The Wild Man, Mark Mero, defeats Isaac Yankem, DDS, by pinfall in 4 minutes and 27 seconds. Yankem is getting the jobber treatment here, already in the ring and waiting without much fanfare at all. And here we have the debut of the Wild Man, Mark Mero. This is still pretty far off from the Golden Gloves boxer gimmick that I was honestly a fan of as a kid. This is a guy that I'm looking forward to seeing just how he stacks up against my memory of him.
I'm sorry, are you talking about Sable?
Oh, jeez.
God. The very next note I have, but the biggest shocker for me is just how much Sable is already being shoestringed into this. This was early in the match. I didn't realize that Marc Mero's entire angle to start his career in the WWF revolved around Sable. And I don't mean like it's just a coincidence, but it revolves around her. His entire reason for being, right now at least, is protecting and saving Sable. Anyway, back to the match. From the tie-up on, things look a little off. I guess Yankem and Mero were just trying to feel each other out. But then the Wild Man lives up to the gimmick and does a flip over the top rope onto a standing Yankem at the outside. It looked reckless, but it looked good. The follow-up, once Yankem crawls back in the ring, was a little iffy, though. Mero tries for a leg drop over the top rope, but manages to hook his own elbow on the top rope. This didn't look bad so much as just painful, almost as if he's just a little bit green, but we all know he's not. Mero then surprised me with a pretty decent-looking Hurricane Rana, for a Hurricane Rana being applied to somebody that's probably got a good foot over Marc Mero. Yankem then also surprised me with a great-looking clothesline from the corner as a reverse. But that was at about the same time that Hunter Hearst Helmsley was coming down to the ring. Apparently he's there to try to schmooze Sable while she's sitting there. She doesn't seem to show much interest in what Hunter has to say. Back in the ring, Mero hasn't noticed yet, as Yankem has been working pretty hard on him. It was kind of a good-looking, stiff-looking fight going on here. We do end up going to split screen, though. On the one side, ring action, and on the other side, Hunter unsuccessfully chatting up Sable. At one point, Mero lands a really unique and good-looking pin attempt on Yankem. I'm not sure what to call it, but Mero leaped up, hooked his feet under Yankem's armpits, and was able to use his momentum to roll Yankem up for a 2 count. It was a little bit sloppy in the execution, but again, it was unique and ended up looking pretty damn good. That right and then left that Mero gave Yankem to put him to the mat looked pretty good. A couple quick jabs, as well as the top rope flip into the roll-up pin that gets Mero the 3 count and the victory. Sable is on her feet applauding the Wild Man, while Hunter continues to plead his case at her. This draws Mero over to save Sable, pulling her out of the crowd after a little shove with Hunter, leaving Hunter to deal with the security guard, and Mero to sweep Sable up the entryway. So, Ryan, this is a night of debuts, as we've said already. You know, we get more into the era that we are most familiar with. What did you think of the WWF debut of Sable? And also, I suppose, the in-ring debut of Marc Mero, if that matters at all.
That's inconsequential. This is all about Sable. I don't know if you noticed, but before the match started and before we went to break, we actually did hear Isaac Yankem's music. And I only have it noted because when I heard the drill going off, I was shocked. I thought for sure Isaac Yankem was gone at this point. We haven't seen him in a while. We haven't heard about him. But yeah, he showed up here, like you said, to get the jobber treatment, basically. And then we show Sable at ringside. I'm sure that's the last we're going to see of her. And right from the beginning, there's a huge size difference between Mark and Isaac Yankem's. You could see that from the very beginning, but Mark is the aggressor from the beginning and for a good part of this match. There were a couple moves here, like you pointed out, that looked a little bit shaky, but I thought for the most part, the match itself didn't look too bad. Mark reverses a would-to-be slam from Isaac into a pretty decent-looking Hurricanrana, which I thought was a good-looking part of this match. From there, Bartlett, you also pointed out that good-looking, hard clothesline from Jacobs to kind of turn things around for a little bit. But sadly, Hunter comes down and starts bitching at Sable about being out there for Marc Mero. And from there, we get the dreaded split screen for a little while. And the back and forth continues in the ring. It's not terrible, but there's one point where Isaac Yankem reverses with, I could only call a double ass slap. Mero was going for something and Yankum just like double ass slaps him and that's enough for him to take over for the match for a little bit, but not that long, where the Wild Man lands his finisher off the top rope that I have to say, I don't know if it was him or Jacobs that fucked this up, but the finisher was not pulled off very smoothly. I mean, it wasn't completely botched. It was just kind of rough and ugly looking. And all in all, this match was, it was nothing great. It was just kind of there, but none of that really matters because it was really there to showcase Sable. I mean, that was the real point of this match. No one really cares about Mark Mero. Let's see some more Sable, please.
I may not be a fan of the Mandible Claw, but I love a good double ass slap.
Devastating.
The match was okay. I think Mark Mero has a cool move set. I think it was just a little weird using it on Isaac Yankum. I think that maybe his moveset is better for more of like a high flyer type of a wrestler and not an Isaac Yankum. But I don't know. The match was okay. As far as the Sable stuff, like I recall guys like Jim Cornette saying that, I mean, they talk about how the Vinces were like obsessed with Sable, being McMahon and Russo. But I don't think Russo is writing for the show yet. So clearly it's all Vince McMahon that has this obsession with getting Sable involved, and I don't remember her being this involved that early.
Yeah.
Bartlett, like you mentioned, like she eventually buries her own husband.
Yeah.
It's like it's kind of already starting.
Yep.
It's kind of weird. And two things with the Sable thing. Number one, I'm thinking to myself, like, why is she sitting at ringside, like in the stands? Why isn't she just coming down to the ring with Mark Mero? Like, what the fuck?
Well, it said she bought a ticket.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess that's trying to like make some story that, I don't know, she's pursuing him?
Sure. And then the slapping.
The double ass slapping?
The slapping of Helmsley. First off, WWF has no shame because they just buried the fuck out of Helmsley the night before, and then they put him out here for this. So it's like nothing ever happened. But anyway, Sable to me is, she comes off, and we've talked about the poor acting chops that she has, the voice, the annoying voice, all that stuff. She comes off, even here, just trying to slap Helmsley. She doesn't even have to talk. It just doesn't seem natural.
No, It looks like a robot.
Yeah.
Women like Sunny and Marlena, they just come off as naturals right away. Like they know what they're doing and they do it well. But Sable, it just looks awkward and just poor acting already. It's kind of a sign of things to come.
Yeah, I really was pretty taken aback by this, and I'm deliberately trying not to go straight to the hate train for Sable. It's going to really be determined by how they treat Mero going forward, because honestly, if I
well, good luck, man.
I know. But if I step back and try to look at this rationally, if I'm a fan back in 96 and I don't know what's about to happen, this is a pretty good way to set up a story. I mean, now we've got a legitimate reason for Mark Mero and Hunter Hearst Helmsley to go after each other.
I will agree with that. The storytelling is not bad.
Right.
It just so happens that it's Sable.
And that they're kind of ruining who is a good wrestler.
Yeah.
But for me, it's the player involved. Like Sable to me doesn't, like right now, she doesn't look natural in that role.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I completely agree with that. And unfortunately, that's never really going to change.
No, she is never going to look or sound the role.
Yeah. Yeah. Something you said, though, Joe, that really interested me about Hunter here. He just got buried last night. The Ultimate Warrior pretty much just...
Ultimate burial.
dragged him into the middle of the ring and took a big old dumper on his chest. And we're just going to pretend like it didn't happen at all.
Yeah. Never happened.
I like that. I like the fact that we're just going to pretend like that didn't happen. I don't know why, but I like that we can just move on and get on with our lives.
Because if we didn't, where would his career have went?
Yeah, really. But something I wanted to ask you, Joe, because you're more versed in WCW. So I mentioned in my breakdown there that this isn't the Golden Gloves boxing gimmick that we wind up with later on with Marc Mero. His look here looks like Johnny B. Bad from WCW. And while I haven't watched a lot of his matches from WCW, it seems like his moveset here was closer to that than what it would become later on with a more, brawling style. What did you think as somebody that was a fan of Johnny B. Bad watching this? Does he look like the same guy or does he look different at all?
To me, this looked like Johnny B. Bad, but not against Brian Pillman. It was against a shitty Isaac Yankem, and it just didn't work for me, brother.
Okay.
Because Johnny B. Bad was having feuds with guys like Brian Pillman and like Diamond Dallas Page. And to me, the matches were better in WCW. This was just almost like one of those things like, let me get all my shit in, pal. Yeah. And that's basically what it was to me.
For me, who not really a big WCW guy at all, to me, I was getting heavy shades of Superfly Jimmy Snuka.
Yeah.
And I don't know, just kind of his presentation and his moveset.
Yeah.
Superfly Little Richard.
Yeah, Superfly Little Richard. That would be a perfect name for him.
But yeah, it's just like I said, I don't know much about Johnny B. Bad at all, but it was something that you had said in your notes about how he was kind of almost behaving like a high flyer or like a high spot guy. That struck me as like, well, isn't that what Johnny B. Bad kind of tried to be sometimes?
Yeah.
But then again, we see a transition later on whenever he gets into his boxing gear and all that shit and does really well with that moving forward. He doesn't get buried or get put into compromising situations involving boxing in the least bit. So we have a great future to look forward to with Marc Mero.
Sable.
Let's move on to something more positive. Something that I know we all enjoy. The Ultimate Warrior is back. In case anyone was wondering, we get a video package illustrating that fact. The video is, of course, not of wrestling, but of the Warrior running and gesturing.
Is he re-debuting? I don't understand the point of this video.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's exactly like it. This video was basically the same video we've been seeing, except it's after his debut. So
completely confusing.
We're not going to let you see him for free, pal. You got to buy that encore.
Well,
and then tune into Raw next week.
Yeah, I was going to say the Ultimate Warrior will apparently be present on Monday Night Raw next week. At this point in our episode, it is not said in what capacity the Warrior will be appearing. I had to double check because I was whenever it's mentioned again later on, they get a little more specific. But at this point, it's just tossed out there. The Warrior will be present next week. Really looking forward to see that.
I really hope it's the time he wears the big hat with the padding in it to take the chair shot.
Oh, God.
Yeah, the Jerry Lawler feud.
Yeah.
The whole thing with this Warrior return is just, I don't know what I would have done, but their build up to it just seems just so not exciting. All we got were those stupid videos and Vince just losing his mind. He didn't just come in as a surprise and like beat somebody up and then, okay, now we're starting a feud. Here's this guy returning. Like, I don't know. It was just so not lazy, but just cheap. Just a cheap way to bring this guy back.
Lazy is a good word for it because they reused the video here after he debuted.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the way it feels to me is it's like the two-headed calf in the freak show at the fair. Like, you pay the nickel to see the two-headed calf, and you go in and you see it, and you're like, oh, yeah, like, Jesus, that's a two-headed calf. But you don't want to pay another nickel to see it again.
Yeah.
Once you've seen it once, you're kind of done. We saw him last night at WrestleMania 12, and I kind of don't care if I see him again now. I'm not anywhere near as excited as this video thinks I might want to be.
Let's head over to the Gravitron.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? That's the problem with having an attraction. We talked about that in our WrestleMania episode while we were watching it. They booked an attraction here and not a wrestler. And once you've lit that bottle rocket and it's sailed off and hit its report, it's done. It's no longer an attraction. We had that last night, and now it's just kind of fizzling here in front of us.
Yeah. It's just so frustrating because he has had good feuds. Like, he had a good feud with Hogan.
Yeah.
He had a good feud with Macho Man. Obviously, those were years ago, but like, you can still use him to get guys over or get a good feud going.
Because I would argue that the report that we got from Wrestlemania was not an actual report from a firework. It was a fart.
Yeah. Oh, that's a whole nother layer to it too. If Warrior and Helmsley had maybe gone a few minutes and tried to have a little bit of a wrestling match, if Warrior hadn't have been a douchebag about it and changed the match ahead of time, if he would have went a couple minutes and let Helmsley work for him and let Helmsley get him over, maybe it would have been more than that fucking bottle rocket fart.
If he wouldn't have popped up a moment after receiving the pedigree.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll see what happens here in the future, but again, it's not exciting. It's not like it was totally exciting before, but it was kind of cool. We were all looking forward to it because of that nostalgia factor, but it's almost like we're having post-nut clarity on the Ultimate Warrior here. We blew our load last night and we're looking back on it now like, Jesus, what did we just do?
Yeah.
So
300
speaking
pound
of
cow.
Speaking of, we're going to have now a segment featuring Ed Begley Jr. For those of you out there that aren't in the know, Ed Begley Jr. is a character actor that's been in many, many different roles, most notably being the character of Bob Patchett in the Roseanne Arnold movie She-Devil.
Oh, God.
And Henry Starling from the Star Trek Voyager episode Future's End.
He was also the guy that had alopecia in Arrested Development.
Yes. Yeah, I was going for the funnier roles here.
That was a pretty funny role in Arrested Development.
Yeah, it was. You're right.
Gob would always call it alpaca.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming this was something to do with a television show that he was taking part in. I was kind of I didn't know what was going on with this while I was watching it, because there's like a story to this commercial. He's looking for somebody, but I don't know what he was looking for or why he was looking for it. What he does say that stuck with me is that he mentions, something about sticking around after Raw to find out what's going on. So that's really the most amount of information we have to go off of as far as Ed Begley Jr. Maybe we'll see him later to get some clarification. Maybe not. I don't know. Hey guys, did you realize that there was a tag team tournament going on over the past few weeks?
Wait, what?
It's
What
the damnedest
tag
thing.
teams?
Yeah, I mean, apparently
I thought
the
tag
Smoking
teams were
Guns-
banned.
I can see how you would think that. So what happened, I guess, is the Smoking Guns had to vacate the titles at some point somewhere for some reason that nobody fucking knows why. And then they had a tag team championship tournament, like, in the shadows.
Oh.
We didn't know it was going on, really. I mean, we kind of maybe heard whispers of it here and there. The first rule about tag team championship is you don't talk about tag team championship.
They were effective at that.
Yeah. We find out right here, though, that this all culminated at the free-for-all show that aired in the hour before WrestleMania, the tournament coming down to the Body Donnas and the Godwins.
I'm glad they pushed that once a month ago, so I knew it was happening.
Yeah. And on the free-for-all, too. I mean, if I didn't have cable and was going over to my friend's house, who just so happens to have a cheater box, we wouldn't have known that it was happening.
But the free-for-all, they mentioned that it was on that free-for-all, I think, once, like a month ago. I didn't even remember that that's where it was going to finish at.
Well, the high point of the tournament finale is that Sunny used her fantastic booty to distract Phineas and earn the Body Donnas the tag team titles.
Award-winning.
But award-winning. But there's already been a rematch signed for the next In Your House pay-per-view, so this might as well not have happened at all. Before we move along, Ryan, did you have any notes on this segment with Ed Begley Jr. or the current state of the tag team titles and division?
I think I made my comments known a little bit during your explanation of this point. As far as the commercial with the bike guy, I'm confused outside.
Ed Begley Jr.
Yeah, Ed Begley Jr. I'm confused outside of the fact that he has hair and eyebrows. I don't know what else is going on here. As far as the tag team situation goes, I wasn't aware there was a tag team situation. So I'm glad to hear there is, I guess, but I knew nothing of it. So I'm glad to see that we'll learn a little bit something about it here tonight and at the next In Your House.
Yeah, for Ed Begley, I think for the first time ever, I just wrote, what the fuck, and nothing else. I don't have a clue what this is, and I don't care.
Clueless.
And yeah, I like the award-winning buns.
Wow.
That's it.
Yeah. They had to give us this update on the tag team situation because otherwise what's about to happen next just wouldn't fucking make sense. Because we're going to go now into our next match. The Body Donnas, Skip and Zip, with Sonny, defeat Aldo Montoya and Barry Horowitz by pinfall in 5 minutes and 29 seconds. This is not for the championship. We're not going to see another championship match until the pay-per-view, and that's probably just the free-for-all before the pay-per-view. Sonny comes out along with the Body Donnas while, the singles guys are doing the jobber thing already in the ring. And Sonny is talking, but the music is blaring. And I couldn't understand anything she was saying. And I thought that was a shame because she seemed like she was really trying to get her team over. And the one thing that we do know about Sonny is that she is great at being a wrestling personality, and I would like to hear more of what she has to say a little more often and not be getting drowned out by this fucking weird-ass 80s techno-disco music, exercise aerobic workout stuff. The gimmick is getting a little strained. But we definitely did not miss our chance to get the ringside camera stuck up her ass as she climbs out of the ring.
By God.
The action in the ring starts with Skip and Montoya, and the work looks good. It's fast and tight here at the beginning. Then Zip comes in, and the good work continues. Horowitz gets tagged in, and the exchange between Zip and Horowitz was a fantastic sequence of hooks and pin attempts. This was lightning fast. It's a shame that we haven't been seeing much at all of the tag team division because whatever wrinkles were present earlier with the Body Donnas, between Skip and Zip kind of getting used to each other, those wrinkles are mostly gone now. Skip and Zip operate like a well-oiled machine as they tag in and out and double up for chain moves. What I was seeing from the Body Donnas in the first half of this match is kind of up there with the Smoking Guns in terms of tag teamwork, as far as, the fluidity of working as a team as opposed to a single. Montoya suplexes Skip out of the ring over the top rope, follows it up with a splash from the top turnbuckle. This was a great little sequence. In the ring, the tag gets made to Horowitz, who comes in and through a series of moves is able to get Skip into a schoolboy roll-up. Sonny distracting the referee for much longer than a 3 count would have taken, and when the referee finally notices, Zip is able to get in time to break up the pin, and this is where things started to go a little downhill. Aldo and Skip in the ring get a little bogged down with getting spots in as they just blatantly telegraph what they're going to do with each other. But that doesn't last long, as there's a quick tag to Zip, who nails Aldo Montoya with a savage-looking leg drop, or bomb. I'm not sure what that was called, but it looked great. That gets Zip the pin and the 3 counts for the victory. I don't know if my standards for tag team wrestling are just in the shitter because of everything that's been going on, or if this was actually a pretty good match. Joe, what did you think about it?
Well, these California fans and me care way more about Sonny than they do the match, that's for sure. There was a lot of cat calling and whistling, my God, just on full display. And Bartlett, you mentioned you're kind of tired of the Body Donna's gimmick. I don't know what your exact words were on that.
Getting a little old. Sonny is sort of breaking away from the gimmick. She is now wearing different gear that is a little more revealing. She got rid of she definitely ditched that workout gear as a Body Donna, and then she kind of went to the cheerleader stuff, and now she's kind of doing something different. So she's maybe breaking away from it, but obviously the other two guys are still in the gimmick, and I agree with you. It's getting old. The match for me really, I didn't think it was great, but I thought it picked up pretty well after Montoya dove outside, that splash outside the ring from the top. I thought that was pretty cool. And pretty much everything that happened after that was good. So it picked up at the end. I think that the Body Donna's finisher is just incredibly weak. It's just
Zip basically sitting on his opponent. Like, he jumps off the top rope, sits on the opponent, and you can tell he's just being way too careful with it. It doesn't look like a devastating maneuver. So I don't know. I thought the match was okay. It picked up near the end, but I thought the finish was pretty weak.
I thought this was a very good match. Like, I thought the ring work between all four guys here was good. There was nothing I could point out that say this was bad or I didn't like this. Montoya's dive from the top rope to the outside, like you said, Joe, looked really good, and that was probably the high spot of the match. But there was something about this that I couldn't shake the fact that we're not seeing the end of the tag team tournament here. And instead, we're seeing a non-championship match against some ring veterans here that are actually pretty good. Barry Horowitz and Aldo do not do a bad job at all in this match. It's just ruined kind of by my disappointment in the fact that what this match kind of represents. And what that represents is the WWF's just hatred of the tag team division. They just don't care about it at all. And even the King and Vince during this match, they really spend at least half of it talking about other matches and about Sable and things that happened at WrestleMania. Just nobody cares about the tag team division. And it's really clear and upsetting to see, because this match was not bad by any means. I mean, I agree the Body Donna's gimmick is getting a little bit worn here, but the ring work here was not bad by any means, but nobody cared, including anyone involved with this company, except for the four guys involved in this match. But hey, Sonny won 2 Slammy Awards for her ass, so that's the important thing, right?
That is the most important thing. Damn it. And just for anybody out there listening that is interested, this is a neat little match where you get to see the future Chris Candido and Just Incredible take on each other. So any ECW fans, it's kind of a nod to that. We'll move it along here. More advertising for the WrestleMania Encore. This is basically just the same video we had from before. But then we get a quick view of Bob Backlund out there in the crowd, campaigning for president. This was just a very, very fast look at him. We didn't even get a look at his face. It was the back of his head. So real quick, pro or con?
Well, you know, we haven't seen him in quite a while, and if we could just keep it to these brief sightings of him in the crowd, I'll take it. So this is a positive.
Okay, just a second here.
I wish Sable would have slapped Bob Backlund instead of Hunter Hearst Helmsley.
Okay. Just so you know, that was officially the 5th pro for Bob Backlund.
Ooh.
After the past 2 years. So we're catching up somewhat to the con list. It's starting to get a little closer.
Nice.
By the time we hit the election in November of 96, we'll find out what the final verdict on Bob Backlund is. Hey, Doc Hendricks. Doc wants you to call into 1-900-SHAMELESS to hear from Jim Ross what it was like in the locker room with Bret Hart after his loss. I imagine it was probably a pretty passive-aggressive environment. Shell out $1.49 a minute to get the scoop there. After we get some clips of some more kids that had a great time at WrestleMania 12, we come back to the ring where Vince is present and waiting with his microphone and some lube. You know what that means. He's the leader of the new WWF generation. He's the new WWF champion, the most resilient, the most charismatic, Shawn Michaels. And that's where the full orgasm hit was during
the peak.
During Michaels. The peak. He peaked at Michaels, yeah.
He blew his load and his voice.
Well, Shawn comes out, and Shawn is understandably excited, but there won't be any stripping here, as Vince needs to get down to blowing. And of course, it's about the dream of a 12-year-old boy from San Antonio. I was surprised when Vince started this off by recognizing Bret Hart. I don't know why, that kind of surprised me. And Shawn goes straight to his shit. He wanted to get his lines in there before he acknowledged Bret. And that hat that Shawn was wearing while he was giving this interview, plain white with lettering saying WWF Champion March 31st, 1996, Heartbreak Kid. Just ridiculous. It looks like he made that in the back before he came out. Apparently, Jerry the King Lawler will be taking on the Heartbreak Kid next week.
Okay.
It's implied here that it will be a title shot, I think. I'm not sure what to think of that. But what's even more concerning is that during that match with Lawler, Big Daddy Cool Diesel will be filling in for Lawler on commentary. God, I can't imagine that won't be the snarkiest fucking commentary you'll ever hear. Before we get to talking about Diesel, though, Shawn wants to give Bret some credit now, finally. And I am being a jaded fuck, but Shawn was actually very gracious about this, or at least it came across that way. I'm not sure what the real personal situation was like between these two at this time, but Shawn did seem very gracious and very appreciative for, the match that they had. Shawn promises to be a classy champion, and that harkens back to one of Bret's main criticisms of him. This whole time, Shawn's more or less telling Vince to be quiet, and Vince just loves it. He can't get enough of the Heartbreak Kid's verbal abuse. Vince is being gaslighted into a toxic relationship here, folks. And if you want to go back and watch this interview, every time Shawn Michaels tell Vince to shut up, Vince just gets the biggest shit-eating grin on his face.
Vin Man. That's like his pet name. The pet name. Oh, shucks.
Every time Shawn says it, Vince drips a little.
Aw, shucks.
Shawn does lay down some shit on Diesel here, though, and in a great phrase gives us the tagline for the upcoming In Your House, that they are good friends, but even better enemies. As we leave the ring, we're going to join Doc Hendricks at the merch store, or at least a voiceover of Doc Hendricks. And Doc has what I think is probably the best thing that the merch store has offered so far. A plaque that contains a photo of Shawn Michaels, a piece of the ring from WrestleMania 12, and like a little gold plate detailing the specifics of the event. All of this is autographed by Shawn himself, and you can get that for $49.95. That seems like that would be totally worth it to me. That was a pretty cool thing to advertise, as long as it's an actual real piece of the ring.
So I looked it up. The current going price of that piece of memorabilia on eBay is $400.
Yeah, Jesus.
Yep.
Pretty solid investment. I guess I was right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, Joe, now that we've entered the era of Shawn Michaels as WWF champion, what did you think about the way we're kicking it off with this interview, as well as, the other tidbits we got in this segment?
Well, to be honest, I thought it was kind of boring. I didn't really think there was anything great here. Maybe it would have been a little more interesting if Diesel came out and maybe they had a little face-off showdown there. I don't know. I mean, the Jerry Lawler thing, like, why? Why is he getting a match at the WWF title? It doesn't make sense at all. So, I don't know. I don't really have much to add that we didn't already talk about. I don't know. I thought it was kind of boring, and Vince was just absolutely pathetic during this interview. The Vin Man.
I found it to be perfectly fine, I guess. Starts off with Vince giving the Hitman some credit, and Michaels very sarcastically cheering that part of it. It kind of changed a little bit later in the promo. He gives Bret Hart some credit and, calling him, that he proved he is one of the best there ever was. But I don't know. I thought in all it was a decent promo. It went a little bit long. As far as the first championship interview / promo that Shawn Michaels gave, I thought it was perfectly fine. I'm not sure about this Jerry Lawler match they're setting up for next week. I'm sure that's probably going to be pretty forgettable, unfortunately. And then once Michaels starts actually giving Bret Hart some credit, I was a little bit surprised there because he did come off at least as sincere. I'm sure this was just something that Vince McMahon was kind of forcing him to say, but it came across just fine. And I guess that's kind of my general consensus of this entire segment was it was just fine. It was nothing stand out, nor did it really come across as terrible. It was fine.
Yeah, that's a pretty good word for it. I mean, I liked it, but only because I dislike the goofy Shawn Michaels promos and interviews where he's, trying to be ultra hip and cool. I mean, I don't hate those, but especially now that he's champion, this is the kind of, gravitas, I guess, I feel that it deserves. Mm-hmm. But we'll see what happens. We're going to cut to commercial after that last segment and come back to our final match of the night. The Undertaker with Paul Bearer defeats Justin Hawk Bradshaw with Uncle Zebekiah by disqualification in 4 minutes and 28 seconds. While entrances are happening here, we get the info that next week on Raw, there's going to be an arm wrestling contest between Ahmed Johnson and the British Bulldog. That's interesting. I mean, I kind of don't want to see it, but at the same time, I kind of do. Same goes for the news that we're going to be getting Yokozuna versus Vader in singles action. Kind of don't want to see it, but after WrestleMania 12, I kind of do. So we'll see what happens there. In the ring here, Bradshaw pounces at the start and things get going. Much has been made over the course of the night about how beaten and battered The Undertaker is, but he didn't seem like that at all. In this match, he was looking pretty good. But you know what? Hold up. Let's just take a commercial break here now that the match has started. And while we're there, we can hear about the Karate Fighters Slam of the Week. And the Slam of the Week here is when Goldust ran into Roddy Piper with that golden Cadillac at WrestleMania 12. Back in the match again, we come back to The Undertaker getting reversed into a sidewalk slam. Bradshaw taking back the lead. Lawler was making a big deal out of Paul Bearer leaving an open contract out where people like Uncle Zebekiah and Bradshaw can take advantage of it. I don't really see what they were going for with that, and it really stuck out as something just kind of odd to me, the idea of The Undertaker having contracts. I mean, technically, I suppose that's correct for the whole wrestling aspect of it, but he's the dead man. What fucking zombie man goes by contracts? Anyway, this match by this point had a couple of shaky points in it. These competitors are about the same size. And at points, it seemed like Bradshaw was maybe not used to working with someone his size. But, that's not to say that the work didn't look good. It did look good, especially with that chokeslam in the following tombstone. Bradshaw got with the picture and gave Undertaker some great height for that chokeslam, and then participated nicely in working the tombstone after. As Undertaker goes in for the pin, out of nowhere, Mankind hits the ring to draw the disqualification. And here, ladies and gentlemen, we're kicking off one of the best feuds in the history of the WWF. My fucking nipples are erect just reading these notes. As Mankind proceeds to completely dismantle The Undertaker, throwing him against a barrier, bouncing The Undertaker off of the ring stairs, dropping a flying elbow onto Taker, while Taker's prone on the concrete, and finally the Mandible Claw while Undertaker is still out of it. It's fair to say that we have never seen The Undertaker this thoroughly manhandled and beaten as officials come out to drag Mankind away, leaving Undertaker alone. But that wasn't it. Mankind manages to break away again and again, attacking The Undertaker multiple times, savagely and repeatedly inserting the Mandible Claw, while Paul Bearer just looks on helplessly, wailing. After a commercial break, we come back to get video replays of what just happened. And then more information next week on Raw. We'll get an update on The Undertaker. We'll get an interview with the Ultimate Warrior. See, now it gets clarified. We're not going to see him wrestle. He's going to be given an interview. And for some fucking reason, Jerry the King Lawler will be taking on Shawn Michaels for the WWF Championship. And that's it. We fade to black, and our episode is over. Ryan, please get us going on our final match of the night and the way that Raw ended.
It starts out, he's just wrestling Bradshaw here, and Bradshaw starts off against Undertaker as the aggressor, surprisingly, and the beginning of this match is all Bradshaw. Bradshaw tosses the Undertaker outside the ring. We go to commercial. When we come back, Bradshaw is still in control and still kind of beating on the Undertaker. And at this point, I'm a little surprised at how long Bradshaw has really been in control of this match. I mean, it's all looked good. These two big guys in the ring, they've been going at it, and the Undertaker has been making Bradshaw look pretty good here. I was just a little bit surprised they would have a newcomer come off as so strong against the Undertaker. But the Undertaker, of course, rallies with a clothesline and then lands a good-looking choke slam and a tombstone. But everything before that is pretty much irrelevant, because after that, Mankind hits the ring and interrupts it for a disqualification, and there starts one of the greatest feuds ever in wrestling. He starts beating on the Undertaker, and this is stuff we have not seen applied to the Undertaker. The way that they are setting up Mankind as someone who is an actual threat to the Undertaker is fantastic. After he applies the Mandible Claw, you could hear Paul Bearer standing over the battered Undertaker wailing, "No, no!" I mean, it was great. The Undertaker, he has this giant loogie just hanging on his beard after the Mandible Claw. I mean, we get to see Foley pull off his classic run off the curtain, give the elbow onto the outside of the ring where he takes the brunt of it onto his hip. Everything about this was great, and it set up in a way making the Phenom look vulnerable in a way that we have not seen yet, and allowing Mankind to just dismantle. I think that was the word you used, Bartlett, and that's just perfect. He dismantled the Undertaker here, and I loved every second of it.
Yeah, I'm going to just skip my comments on the match itself because I don't think cowboys wear gigantic knee braces. So I'm going to skip the match and go straight into the Mankind stuff because, that's why we're here. It's Monday Night Mankind. They're not wasting any time with Mankind's push. To me, it's almost like this Mankind thing is almost what they wanted out of like an Isaac Yankem type of a character. Like, this is what they wanted. You know what this kind of reminds me of is, first off, I mean, like you guys said, it's one of the best feuds ever in wrestling, which I agree it is. But it's also probably the best feud for The Undertaker since like 1991 with Hogan.
Yeah.
And if you think about that feud, that was like the first time where Hulk Hogan fans felt very threatened, like, oh, this Undertaker guy he's going to kill Hulk Hogan. And it's like the roles are reversed here. So now it's like you said, Ryan, this guy Mankind is a threat to the Undertaker. Like, it's so great. And that classic elbow drop from the apron. I know Mick has trouble getting around these days, probably because of that move. Yeah. But I mean, man, that is just such a classic move and just looks so great. A lot of great heat for Mankind coming out of this episode of Raw.
Yeah, there's nothing much to add to that. It's just fantastic. It's so great to see, and I can't wait for this to continue on into the future. Well, as I said, that was the end of our episode, so we're going to take it on over now to highlights and lowlights. Joe, why don't you go first, please?
It's easy for me. The highlight is everything with Mankind. I think that's going to be across the board here. Honestly, guys, a lowlight, like, I don't even have one. I think that we are on a roll here with episodes of Monday Night Raw. Even though the times that Ed Begley was on the screen, I just said, what the fuck, and moved on. Yeah, I love this whole episode.
Yeah, the highlight here, no surprise, Mankind himself. Everything about him. His match was great. His interruption with Undertaker and his match and everything that happened after it was great. Mankind is the highlight. Low light, Joe, I kind of agree. This is It's almost stupid to come up with a low light, but since I felt like I was obligated to, I'm going to just go with the lack of respect for the tag team belts. We had a tag team match here that wasn't even for the belts, and they showed us footage of how much they don't care about the tag team belts. So if I'm going to nitpick and come up with something, that's what I'm going to fall on.
Yeah, Mankind, everything about him is my highlight. And while, Joe, you do make a very, very good point about so many good things happening in this episode, and a lot of the episodes that we've had recently, I'm going to have to fall with Ryan and be a nitpicking dickbag here. Not with the same low light, though. My low light was picked as being Sable and Sable's heavy involvement in the debut of Mark Mero. Like I said, I was a fan of Mark Mero as a kid. And watching him be just emasculated in his in-ring debut, buried right from the start, is just...
Immediately being removed as he will never be a opponent for Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah.
Wow, that was Stone Cold's wishings.
Because of that. Because he got buried by his wife.
Yep. But, yeah, that's it. But you do make a great point, though, Joe, about the Ed Begley Jr. shit. Like, it was... The stuff that was off in this episode was pretty easy to just shake off and, like, say, okay, let's just move it along here and not really care about.
Well, I mean, those two Begley commercials together were like 10 seconds combined.
Yeah.
So,
and like I said, just looking at it rationally, the story for Mero and Hunter that just so happens to involve Sable, the story is good. It's a good way to get an angle going. So, unfortunately, again, just it's Sable. So, all right. Joseph, do you have any contemporary wrestling news from on and around April 1st, 1996 for us?
Yeah, guys, Bret Hart is expected to take a hiatus until at least the end of summer. Dave Meltzer compares this Bret and Shawn situation to Ric Flair and Sting from 1990, as that was Flair's last great title reign.
oh,
So Meltzer seems to think that Shawn's the new star, and Bret is old news. However, according to what Bret Hart has told people, his hiatus is not just to do acting gigs. It almost seems as if he's taking time off because he knows that Shawn Michaels will self-destruct, which puts him in a better position when he returns.
wow.
And holy shit. Talk about predicting the future.
Yeah.
So that is the latest on Bret the Hitman Hart. It's going to be a while before we see him again unless you tune into Lonesome Dove. The Mark Mero debut, we talked about a little bit of sloppiness there. And Dave Meltzer mentions that WWF has tighter ropes than WCW and seems to think that Mero was having difficulty with that. That is obviously being a nitpicking dickbag, I think, because I would not have noticed that. There were a lot of negative posters in the crowd regarding Shawn Michaels from Bret Hart fans in the stands at this episode of Raw, but they were confiscated prior to the show.
Oh.
The Slammy Awards happened, guys, on March 30th. We know about Sonny winning the Best Buns. Best ring entrance was Shawn Michaels.
Of course.
Best finishing move was Bret Hart.
Okay.
The New Sensation In Excess Award went to Ahmed Johnson.
Yeah.
Injury
best-
award went to Ahmed Johnson.
Yeah. The best broken back, Double J, Jeff Jarrett. Best threads went to Shawn Michaels, and worst threads went to Jim Cornette.
Aww.
Ryan Sonny did not win one for each cheek.
Oh.
She won one for best buns and then one for manager of the year. So I think she was...
Easily confused.
Yeah.
Well, I think she was robbed a little bit. I think she should have got one for each bun. And a Lifetime Achievement Award was given to Classy Freddie Blassie. And that is all.
All right. Well, thank you, Joseph. Illuminating as always. And that's it, folks. We're done with this one. I want to thank you again for joining us. If you like what we're doing here and want to connect with us, you can email us at WRASSLINRAW. Just add @gmail.com to the end of that to submit questions or comments. Check us out on social media and on every podcast subscription platform. While you're there, don't forget to follow and subscribe to get every episode of Wrasslin Raw coming to you every week. Give us a 5-star review and let your friends know how much cooler they would be if they became Rawheads like you and me. Next week on Wrasslin Raw, we're going to take a look at the Raw that aired on April 8th, 1996, with matches featuring Jerry Lawler, Duke the Dumpster Droese, and many more. So, for Joe and Ryan, I'm Jason, and this has been Wrasslin Raw.